Well, me and the boy have showed up to cut the rest of this crop off. I actually got thrown out of here the other day, yesterday, I guess last night. There was a truck sitting here. My wife was coming home and said, "Hey, honey, there's a truck over there." I walked over like always to say, "Hey, what's going on? Who are you?" You know, I plant this crop here. And the guy got a little bit heated. And we didn't have an altercation, but it got a little bit tense. I know who the dude is. He's kind of trouble. He's got a reputation. Let's put it that way. And he was basically representing the widow that inherited the place and saying that he would run off anybody that was over here because it is a trouble spot. The house got burned down. I mean, not by mistake, by arson. The house got burned down. The old man got run off. He died. But I had permission to plant this, and he and I were friends, and I did watch out for him as best I could. He wasn't living here when it got burned. But I'd met his widow one time, you know, when he was alive, but I hadn't been in contact with her and didn't know what was going to happen with the place. So, you know, her name is on the title. It's hers. I have no qualms about that. She doesn't want anybody here. She probably doesn't understand the dynamic of the neighborhood, that it's better to have somebody here that knows what's going on than it is to have it vacant. Because with it vacant, the squatters are the next thing that happens. But we'll see. Anyway, most of what I planted, I managed to feed out. And just the residue of, you know, I wanted to see the full crop cycle because this was my first season growing sorghum. So I just wanted to get an idea of the timing. So some of it's not been cut at all. Some of it's been cut a few times. Some of it's been recently cut right to the ground. And I got a pretty good education. You know, I'm starting to wonder why people make more corn silage than sorghum silage, because there's no fertilizer in this at all. And it puts up a lot of biomass, and it seems to have really high palatability. So I'm gonna have to look into that. Let me know in the comments, why is it that commercial ag is geared toward corn silage and not sorghum silage? I feel like you could make equal tonnage of corn silage for a lot, well, maybe not equal. I feel like you could make sufficient tonnage of sorghum silage for a lot less money than corn silage because of the fertilizer input costs. Corn is heavy nitrogen feeder. It seems to me like way more heavy than sorghum, but maybe I'm wrong. I could be totally wrong. I better get to work. Job ain't gonna do itself. No, it doesn't look like a whole lot, but it took us probably 2 solid hours, maybe 3, to get that piled up in there. So here's a chop and drop, some forage sorghum. You know, by farmy ag standards, it's an ugly little crop, but do they look like they're complaining? By God. Now, with a traction like that, when you got 4 of them, and they're going to start fighting in a minute, they're going to start butting each other. But with an attraction like that, where every single animal runs to get in and eat, you're not going to have a goat busting through fences or getting their head stuck in fences trying to reach that leaf on the other side when you got highly palatable forage for them. Granted, they will race to a sack of corn or feed just the same, but it's not good for your wallet, and it's not good for their rumen. I mean, if two wrongs don't make a right. You cannot beat God's design for mineral nutrition, and he built plants to mine minerals. Well, side note, it's the same with pigs. Man, they love that stuff. It'll save you a lot of money if you're willing to do the work. Ain't that always the way it is in life? Me and my kids are out here today with our old Kubota L260, and what we got here is a BCS Bio 100 chipper. This was something somebody scrapped. I bought it for $100. It's got the chipper section, like, you know, wood chipper, brush chipper, whatever you want to call it. It's got an anvil right there, and coming up it's got knives. So there's the knife. I think there's 2. These pivot pins are for these flails in here. And I've got the screen down because it just clogs. It will not work with that screen up. But inside, you've got these swinging anvils that smash stuff. And so if I drop things through the top, I get a longer smash. It works good for the grassy top type stuff, but it does not work very well for the shafts and stalks of this foraged sorghum that I grew this year. That's a smashed sorghum stalk right there. I prefer it be chipped finer. That's really a non-digestible fiber to a pig. And I do feed this to pigs and goats. I mean, obviously the goats will ruminate on it. Goats really actually like chewing on the stems of sorghum, whereas pigs are more into the leaves. They'll chew that up and spit it out. The goats will digest it completely. But the chopper mostly makes a much finer material like this, more like a coleslaw. And I believe that will be more rapidly digestible. The purpose of ensiling is to break down these fibers. Now, I don't think that chunk is going to get broken down much, particularly in a monogastric. So I prefer it be chopped finer. I guess that also gets out more oxygen and gives you a better fermentation. But I'm not going to complain, you know. I'm not going to complain at all. This stuff here, if it goes in and it gets wasted, I'm feeding it out on my soil. So, you know, if they don't eat it, if it ends up going into the soil, that's acceptable too. We're going to go pressure wash some drums, open top 55-gallon drums right now. Since we got the machine dialed in, we're ready. Basically, my daughter is going to probably be stomping. My son is going to be shoveling and loading, and I'm going to be grabbing out of this trailer and packing through the chipper. Mostly I'm feeding into here, and I find the best way to do it is put on a big thick pair of welding gloves. I have to have gloves on. I don't like having gloves for the safety risk of getting your hand yanked in, but I have to have gloves because of the quantity of thorns that are in here. There's no way I can grab this barehanded. Put molasses in our drum to make it sweet feed, increase palatability, make sure that the microbes have a sugar to eat. I mean, most of what we're trying to grow is fiber digesting microbes, but it can't hurt. Some people put salt, some people put molasses. I think the third world, they put a lot of molasses. That's what we're gonna do. Well, there's the outcome. You wipe the rim off, make sure there's no blades of grass hanging out or anything like that, so you get a good seal. You put that lid on, stomp it down. You want it to be spongy, springing up, you know. You're trying to have no oxygen in there. When I'm standing on it, I take a clear box wrapper, you know, packaging tape, and I tape that rim about 2 wraps and tuck it all underneath to make sure there's no air gonna be able to get in there. I don't think I could pick it up. I'm gonna say 250 to 300 pounds. And I can tip it, but nah, there ain't no way I could pick it up. So let's say 500 to 700 pounds, 500 to 600 pounds of feed. And You know, 55-gallon drum is a pretty simple quantity. It's a good measuring cup. So I can go through this winter and say to myself, well, gee, I had 3 hogs, mid-sized, 3 hogs, and then 4 goats, 2 of them a little bit bigger, 2 of them a little bit smaller. And this is the extent of winter we had. I can map out and say I started feeding them from this date. How far did this feed go? This phase of my ag journey, homesteading journey, is measurement. This phase is where I'm learning how much of everything do I need? What are the outcomes? You know, how does the whole program work? I can handle it on this scale. I can't handle having rented 50 acres and having 100 head of something on it and being out of money, out of time, having some condition pop up and I can't feed them. I can't handle that. So I'm learning it in a block size unit that once I've got the numbers dialed in, I can expand it linearly and the economy of scale goes up. Now that I know what it takes to clear ground, prepare ground, seed the ground, grow the crop, harvest the crop, process that crop, I needed to know what all went into the process. The information I've got now is basically what all goes into producing a high quality food crop, what goes into storing it, how many heads will it feed, you know, and then what are the nutritional outcomes? Not that I'm taking lab work on these animals, but do they breed back? You know, do they have a bunch of miscarriages? Do they fail to breed? Do they have twins? Do they have triplets? Do they have singles? This is all some stuff I can start to quantify. And that's what I've been after. With this information, I feel like it's a good foundation for me to build off of as a springboard to go larger. I was scared to jump into buying livestock because of the unknowns. Well, now my fears are relieved because the unknowns are removed and they've been replaced with very, very well knowns. My wife laughs anytime I say the word very. Every time I say it. But I now have a very clear understanding, a very clear picture of the process, and that gives me the confidence not to take a plunge. I'm not taking a plunge anymore. I wiggled a toe in and I learned, and now I'm making very calculated moves that have very minimal risk because of what I've learned in the process.